The following program is brought to you by Bruce Telecom and Whiteman TV.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our fifth Adventure Talk of 2017. I'd like to welcome Chris McDonald today from Samaritans Purse to talk to us about Operation Christmas Child and her trip to Nicaragua. So I'd like to say a few words first, just to introduce our speaker. So Chris McDonald is the regional manager for Samaritans Purse with Operation Christmas Child. And before coming to Samaritans Purse in 2014, she was the Youth Center Director at Youth for Christ in London. Prior to that, she was the Event and Internship Coordinator at Teen Challenge Farm, a drug and alcohol recovery program for men in Lambeth. And for 10 years before that, she was the Residential Director for Christian Horizons, supporting the developmentally handicapped population in Toronto and Woodstock. She's also a mother of 4, and she resides in London, Ontario. So thank you so much, Chris, for joining us today. And I'd also like to thank our sponsor, Hampton Court Comfortable Retirement Living, for providing us again with our muffins and treats and supporting our lecture series. And one more thank you is definitely due to our committee members, George Cridland and Elaine Palmer, for putting all the hard work into organizing this year's lecture series. So thank you so much. And if you have any interest yourself in joining our committee, we will be meeting this spring to talk about next year's Adventure Talks. So put your hands together and welcome Chris McDonald.
Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here. I had a lovely drive up here yesterday from London. Despite the fact it was a bit overcast, it was a beautiful drive. I grew up camping up Cypress Lake, kind of Tobermory area most of my life, so I always love coming back up to this part of Ontario. As Adrian mentioned, I work for Samaritans Purse, and Operation Christmas Child is one project of Samaritans Purse. So Samaritans Purse was founded in 1970 as a response to care for the physical and spiritual needs of those living around the world that live subject to situations such as poverty, war, natural disaster, famine. All those types of situations are the types of situations where Samaritans Purse will be present where they can. Samaritans Purse is poised all around the world doing relief and development work. And some of their projects include water projects. We're heavily involved in Cambodia and the Sudan and other countries, taking in clean water filtration systems for residential homes for families. And also we've had a Canadian team develop a biosand water filter large enough for schools. So we also have clean water projects available in schools there. And along with that, they'll do training and teaching in sanitation and hygiene, just to support those communities to stay healthy. Samaritans Purse also has a Healthy Families project. Underneath Healthy Families, we provide things like sustainable agricultural programs for families living in areas where they just don't have the supports and food that they need. So they'll be given support and training in agriculture. We also have livestock bank and goat projects that help families gain a sustainable income to support their families, as well as we have programs for women and children that are exploited in the sex trade. So those programs fall under the Samaritans Purse Healthy Families programs. We also have World Medical Missions. Number of years ago, not too long ago, we would have maybe heard about West Africa and the Ebola crisis that was there. There was 2 physicians that actually contracted Ebola from the U.S. And were flown back to the naval base there in Georgia. Both of those physicians were Samaritans Purse doctors. Nancy Wright-Bowl was a nurse, actually, and Kent Brantley was a physician. So we're heavily involved in world medical missions around the world, just bringing life-saving medical needs, medical clinics, hospitals, immunizations, those types of programs are what Samaritans Purse does to reach out around the world. And we also have disaster relief. That's one of the areas where we excel because we are positioned as a ministry, as an agency around the world. We're quick to be able to respond. So we were one of the first responders on the ground in Nepal. When they had the earthquake there, we already had people on the ground. We have responded to war situations in countries, most recently in Ukraine. We have a medical, actually it's a mobile medical hospital on the northern border of Iraq at this present time, serving children and women that have been brutally injured and wounded due to the war there in the Iraq and Syria area. We also respond to natural disasters, as I mentioned, so we're in countries like Haiti and the Philippines and the Nepal, and we also deploy locally when there's an emergency. So we have a disaster relief unit here in Ontario. Most recently, we responded to the flooding in the Windsor-Tecumseh area and had our emergency team there, and their main focus was reaching out to support those who had greatest need. So if there was an elderly individual there, or somebody that didn't have insurance, or somebody that was possibly had some type of handicap or developmental need, that's who Samaritans Purse was there to support primarily in the Windsor area. So as I mentioned, there is more information about Samaritan's Purse out there on the small table. We have lots of people who love traveling in their retired years and like to go on a water filtration trip. There's more information about some of those projects out there on the table. My passion, however, is with Operation Christmas Child. So in 1993, the Romanian orphanages were kind of hitting the news here. We were recognizing that there was multitudes of children left unattended to in Romanian orphanages that were not only starved for just even human attention, but that they were suffering a lot of neglect. So there was a couple of, in the UK at that point actually, that wanted to reach out in a real tangible way and bless these children with a Christmas gift. And that is how Operation Christmas Child was founded. So the first year, they partnered with a couple actually in Canada, and they shipped shoebox gifts off to the children in the Romanian orphanage, just recognizing that every child deserves to have a gift at Christmas. And since then, Operation Christmas Child has expanded to over 80 countries around the world, and we have 13 countries that send shoeboxes out to those 80 that receive. And we, again, are targeting children that live in countries where there's war, where there's natural disaster, where there's poverty, where there's famine. So last year, those 13 countries collaboratively packed and shipped over 11 million shoeboxes to children living in these difficult situations. So what I want to share with you today is kind of the journey of a shoebox. I know that there's lots of folks here that have packed shoeboxes. And so what I want to do is kind of take you on a journey with me to Nicaragua, because some people actually wonder, well, do the boxes we pack actually get where they're supposed to go? Is somebody profiting from having these shoe boxes? And so there was 25 Canadians that traveled with me to Nicaragua in 2015. And we are just going to take a journey there. And as I mentioned, so there's a team of 25 Canadians. We're all from all across the country, all different ages. My son was probably the youngest. He was 17. And we had folks well up into their 60s traveling with us. In 2016, that's where the boxes packed in Canada went to. So those countries that are noted there, anyone that packed a box in Canada, it would have been shipped to one of these countries. And so that's where we went to, is Nicaragua. So we are north of Costa Rica and south of El Salvador. And we flew into the main airport there, which is Managua. And that's on the left-hand side. And we spent most of our time kind of down south of Grenada, even in here in a smaller area called Santo Tomas. And we had with us shoeboxes that had been packed by Canadians. So when we went there as a team of 25, we were literally able to give out shoeboxes that possibly some folks in this room had packed. And it was pretty incredible. So our shoeboxes are delivered in all kinds of fashions. So they go on camelback, they go on elephant, they go on donkeys, they go in pickup trucks, they go in dugout canoes, they go on the backs of men that have to truck them into the jungle. So wherever mankind can get the boxes, that's how they go. In Nicaragua, we traveled on a bus, and so we were able to follow this little Toyota truck every day. And every day we went to a different area. And we handed out over 1,000 shoe boxes, met over 1,000 children in the week that we were there, and gave them a shoe box. And so every morning we got up and we followed this little red pickup truck, never knowing where we were going to end up. And we just went to where it would go. Sometimes there'd be 50 children there waiting for us. Sometimes there would be 500 children waiting for us. But it's all planned ahead of time. We work very closely with national leadership teams on the ground in all of our receiving countries. And so it's not happenstance that we show up with shoe boxes. That's all been organized and planned by the national leadership team on the ground. They will have already invited, personally by invitation with parental permission, said number of children to come. So they know before we get there how many boys are coming, how many girls are coming. And if you've ever packed a shoebox, you'll know that you have to choose a box either for a girl or for a boy. And then you have to choose an age group for who you're packing. So there's a 2 to 4 age group, a 5 to 9 age group, and a 10 to 14. So that national leadership team will already have ready in place before we arrive an invited number of children of a certain age group and a certain gender. And so they already know how many boxes they need, and they're organized, and those boxes go ahead of us when we arrive. And the children there are beautiful. They're full of life. They may not have shoes on their feet, and their clothes may be too big. But the first thing we do when we show up there is we spend about an hour or so playing with the kids. They loved this parachute. Some of them don't even have a ball. They don't even have a skipping rope. They're literally playing with sticks and stones and things that they can find on the ground. So when we pull out things like this parachute, it was just a magnet. The kids just loved diving underneath this, or we would throw a ball on top of it and fling it up in the air. That's my son just playing volleyball with some of the boys on the inside. We had things like bubbles. We did nail painting. Some of them wanted to play hide and go seek. So the team of 25 of us, we never knew when we showed up, there might be 20 kids there to play with, there might be 300 kids there to play with. We had to just kind of spread ourselves around. So they loved skipping, and the unique thing was it was the boys that wanted to do the skipping, it wasn't the girls. So here, it's different, right? It's opposite. But there, we would literally have the young men lined up to do skipping. Maybe they just wanted to show off for the girls, I don't know. But they would try lots of things, twirling and touching the ground. We did balloon animals, and they're just basic kids. This ball here, if you can see it up top, it's just an inflatable beach ball, but it's oversized. It's a really big beach ball. And this little guy here, as soon as I pulled it out of the bag and started blowing it up, he just stuck with me like glue. He wanted to get his hands on this ball. And I kept blowing it up and kept blowing it up and kept blowing it up. And it wasn't blowing up. And I'm like, okay, I'm not in that bad a shape. I'm sure I can get this thing blown up. Well, I couldn't. So then I got like a balloon pump, to hand pump it up. And I just couldn't get it blown up. And then I finally realized there was a slice in the ball. It had been cut. So I went and got the nurse, and we got some surgical tape. And we fixed this ball because I had to get it blown up for this little guy. He followed me around for 20 minutes. That's how long it took us to get this ball blown up. And him and I just played volleyball with that for a while, and then we had some other kids join us. But I can tell you, if I pulled a ball like that out around here, a kid might be interested for 5 minutes, and then they're on to the next thing, right? But very, very simple gifts there go a very long way. So once we're done playing with the children, we have a couple hours to do that. The national leadership team that's there, they'll get the children organized knowing that it's time to receive their shoe boxes. So they literally sit them boys on one side, girls on the other, and the 2 to 4-year-olds are at the front, and then the 5 to 9s in the middle, and then the 10 to 14s at the back. And so here they're all getting organized. This area, we had over 400 children come to receive shoe boxes here. It was also not a safe area. So we do work closely with our leadership teams. We don't want to put children in jeopardy giving them products and shoe boxes. And so in this specific location, they were brought in, usually by a local pastor. Some of them were on fruit and vegetable trucks. Some of them were on just wagons pulled by donkeys. Some of them walked. But the area was all cordoned off, and then they were bused. Some of them were actually bused. So when they got their box, afterwards they went home to open them. So they do hear a Bible story when they get there. So this is Evelyn. She's part of the national leadership team there. She's a teacher in Nicaragua. And so she'll share a Bible story with them. And then we start handing out the boxes. But the children cannot open their boxes as soon as they get them. They have to wait until everybody gets their shoebox. And so while they're waiting, we have a little booklet that we give to them, which they love to read. It's all colorful. It's in their language. For some of them, it's the first colored little booklet they've ever even seen. And we offer it to them, and they choose whether they would like to take it or not. But I tell you, out of all the 1,000 children I saw, they all took it. And it's a booklet about the Bible story, about Christmas, about what Christmas is really all about. And so while they're waiting for everybody to get their shoebox, they're talking amongst each other. They're reading their booklets. Sometimes they don't have to wait too long. Sometimes in that big distribution, they had to wait about an hour and a half. And for a lot of the children that receive a shoebox, for some of them, this is the only gift they've ever had. Some of them don't even know what to do with it when they get it. They don't even know that they're supposed to open it up. Or they open it up and they take one thing out of it and they give the box back to you because they don't understand that everything in that box is for them. Once every child's got a box, they're told to hold their box up over their head, and then their national leader will count down from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then they'll all get to open their shoe boxes. And just like children here, some children there are just exuberant, and they're ripping into their box like there's no tomorrow. Other kids are taking out one thing at a time and setting it in a little orderly fashion on their chair. Some just take out one thing and close the lid and save the rest of it to take home. Some of them are really shy and don't want to open it in front of anybody. So there's a whole different, just like here, kids are all different personalities, and they're the same there. But I can tell you that very simple things like a bar of soap and a face cloth and school supplies and a die-cast car and a ball and a skipping rope. This little guy was in the front row at one of the distributions I was at. He was a little fellow who was not opening his box. So everybody around him was opening, and he wasn't opening it. He looked a little confused. So I went over to him and kind of, I don't speak Spanish, so I just kind of initiated lifting the lid of the box. And he was kind of looking at me, trying to figure me out, wasn't sure what was going on. So I just slowly lifted the lid of the box, and what was on top of the box was this little stuffed dog. Well, his eyes instantly went like that. And then he looked at me and looked at the dog and looked at me. It was like he was asking me, is this mine? Can I take this? So I took it out and gave it to him. And for about 45 minutes, the rest of the distribution time, because he was in the front row, he had that little stuffed dog right in the crook of his neck with his hands on it, just feeling the softness next to his face. That's all he touched. He didn't take anything else out of his box. He just loved this soft little white dog that he got. We see lots of children in some areas with swollen bellies or, orangey colored hair, which we know means signs of malnutrition. But this simple little doll for this little girl, I don't know about you, but my kids had lots of dolls and lots of cars and lots of balls and lots of toys. My son and I, David, when you go on a distribution trip, you're allowed to take your own shoebox. You can take a box and then choose a child to give it to. But what I did instead was networked with 2 day camps in the London area. Actually, one wasn't. One was up more close to Durham. And this little guy, I took a shoebox and gave to him, and that shoebox was from a day camp in London. So the day camp children brought shoebox items with them during their week at camp, and then they have what we call a packing party on the last day of camp, and they put together boxes for children, and they put in notes and they put in pictures. And so I took a box down from one camp, and my son took a box down from another camp. So we were able to share them back with all these kids from these summer camps who got one of their shoe boxes. So these kids on this end of it were just really thrilled to see that this little guy got the shoebox that came from Camp Zion, and my son picked him out. Now, he wasn't allowed to open his box there because we weren't in a safe area. But we did take out a few special things and show them to him. And one of the special things was a photograph of all the kids from the camp where the box came from that he received that day. So each of those camps had packed probably about 150 boxes between other campers. But I asked each camp to just give me one box, one from a boy, and that's the box from Camp Zion. And then there's another box that I picked from a girl from the London day camp. So this little guy's name was Michael. He just zoned in on David as soon as we got there. He just wanted to hang out with him. He wanted to sit with him. He wanted to be around with him. And so David gave his box to Michael. That's what it looks like when it's done. I mean, there's lots of chaos everywhere. Kids are excited, families are excited. The one thing you recognize when a child gets a shoebox is it's not just a child's blessing, it's the whole family's blessing. So their parents are often there, their siblings are there. Our goal is one child, one shoebox, one time. So it can take up to 2 to 3 years for a national leadership team to reach all the children in their community with a shoebox gift that meet the criteria that we talked about. And so Michael got his shoebox this time, but his older brother had his about 6 months earlier. So sometimes you might hear, oh, not every child gets a shoebox. Well, it's not possible that they all get them at one time. Logistically, our leadership teams can't even move that many boxes through their countryside at one time. So they do it in stages. So this is just a sample of the kids. They all came in on the fruit and vegetable truck with their local pastor, and he was taking them back to their home. And this is what most of their homes are. So as we drove around the area, and in this specific area where we were in, this is what most of the children are living in. And if you get a chance to look in the door, it's pretty much a dirt floor, maybe a wooden table or a wooden bed. No bedding, no closet, no dresser, no refrigerator, no toolbox full of stuff. And so you recognize when you see their possessions are a plastic basin and a clothesline and a plastic chair, you really recognize when you're there how significant this little shoebox gift is to these children and to their family. They don't have a means for dealing with a lot of their garbage. And so it is important, if you do pack a shoebox here, and you can leave some of the packaging here, it's a good idea to do that. If you have packaging that's useful, like it's in a Ziploc bag or it's a pencil case, that's reusable packaging. But if you maybe put in a little sack of marbles, and once you rip that little net open, you can't reuse that, right? It just becomes garbage. So we've just encouraged people to maybe rip that open, throw the garbage out here, recycle what we can, and put those marbles in a Ziploc bag or a little Tupperware container, something that is reuseful for them that they can reuse. So the power of a simple gift. Who packs shoe boxes? Yeah, we have volunteers here. We have members from churches. We have a lot of participation from churches that pack shoebox. It's a fall project. So although we call it Operation Christmas Child, we pack her in the fall in the spirit of Christmas. Because the first year it was done in the Christmas season. But we can't possibly get 11 million shoeboxes out at Christmas time anymore. It's grown so significantly. So the shoeboxes are distributed throughout the year. Some of our countries don't want them at Christmas time. It's their rainy season. They can't even access communities at that time of year. So we work with our national leadership teams and we send the boxes to them, but we pack them in the fall here in the spirit of Christmas. And we have church groups and children's groups and families and individuals and retirement communities and day camps and sports teams and school classrooms. So what's awesome about this project is everyone can get their hands on it. A lot of us can write checks and give them and donate them, which is great. But this project allows you to actually get your hands on a gift that you can choose and select those items that you want to put in a shoebox. And we do ask that people focus on 3 main areas when they're packing a shoebox. The first being school supplies. School supplies are really key. For a lot of our children in our receiving countries, if they don't have school supplies, they can't go to school. They just can't. The resources are not there. If they're not in school, they're not with their peers. It can mean that they're then left unattended during the day as parents need to go and work, and that leaves some of them in vulnerable situations. Or they have to go with their parents to where they're working in a field or a factory, and it's not a great place for children. So we really encourage people to put in school supplies, some pens and pencils and an eraser and a school notebook. Those types of things are really important. Hygiene items are very important. Just a basic bar of soap and a face cloth and a toothbrush. I've seen videos of kids getting toothbrushes. I talked to one boy who shared a toothbrush with 12 other kids in an orphanage. And when he got his toothbrush, he was through the roof when he realized this was just for him. So again, we wouldn't think of wrapping up a toothbrush and a bar of soap and a face cloth at Christmas time for somebody here, maybe. But over there, they're excited to get school supplies. They're excited to get a toothbrush. And then the third item that we like to focus on is something special, something fun. And you look at the age of the child that you're packing a box for, maybe it's a boy 5 to 9. and a couple die-cast cars, and a rubber ball that he can play with, a harmonica. Just simple little things like that go a long way. We collect all those boxes back up in November, so we have across Canada about 400 different collection points where boxes all funnel into. And then from there, that third week in November, we then truck them to one of two locations in Canada. So there's a processing center in Calgary, and there's one here in Kitchener. And I know we've got folks here that have been to the processing center in Kitchener. And all of our boxes need to get inspected. So every box is inspected before we can ship it abroad. We have to adhere to customs regulations in our countries. If we don't, we can get the project shut down. So we don't send anything that's liquid, because that can destroy the contents of a box. We don't send items that reflect war. So even camouflage is really trendy here, to wear a camouflage t-shirt or camouflage ball hat, but we don't send camouflage to our receiving countries because war is a reality there. And we also are not allowed to send any food. And so that includes even gum and candy, no food. So these are customs regulations in our receiving countries, and we've worked closely to have these relationships with our countries, and so we honor their regulations. And so every time people pack a shoebox, there's a brochure that comes out, and it will guide them about what to put in and what to leave out of a shoebox when they pack. So after they're all inspected in one of these two locations, then they're shipped out to our 13 countries around the world. They may be held in shipping cartons here before they make it through the waterways on ship into the hands of children around the world. But I can tell you, I saw boxes that I handed out with letters in them from people from Kitchener. I saw shoeboxes with letters and a card from people from the London area. So it was a blessing to be able to, there was actually a lot of them from the Kitchener, Cambridge area as well. It was a blessing to be able to hand out boxes that we know were packed here in Ontario and traveled all the way to Nicaragua just to bless a child. And when these kids get their boxes, they share what they have. So we've seen them run off and give the bar of soap to the mom, or the little girl gives some of her ponytail holders to her sister. So although they have very little, they're very eager to share. And the other important thing to remember to put in a box is a personal letter or a card or a picture. When my daughter was 16, she traveled to El Salvador with Operation Christmas Child. And up until then, my family had packed boxes, but we hadn't really paid attention to putting in a card or a letter into the shoebox. We didn't think that kids would really care, because they don't really care here. When they get a card, they really, most kids here are more interested in the gift. But there, wow, they were really interested in the card. And my daughter came back and said, Mom, they want to know who sent them a gift. So when you pack a gift, when you send a gift, just do something to tell them who you are, whether it's a little family picture, whether it's a Christmas card that just says Merry Christmas and you sign your name. But my daughter shared that, Mom, it would be like if you or I got this really awesome gift in the mail and we opened it and we loved it, the first thing we're going to ask after we opened it is, who sent this to me? And they all want to know that. So I just want to encourage you, if you pack a shoebox, if you do them on a grand scale, like some of the camps did, I just encouraged the camp to take one photograph of all the campers, and then we went to Costco and they printed off like 200 of them for real cheap, and so they were able to put a picture of all the campers that came together to pack shoeboxes that summer that went out. The other great thing to know if you're doing your homework about where to contribute, where to give your time, where to give your resources, is Samaritan's Purse has a AAA rating. We have mandated ourselves to operate within 10% of our revenue stream. So 90 cents on every dollar goes directly to the ministry field to be impacting families and children around the world. So if you are a giver, it's just a blessing to know that. I'm just going to close with a little bit of a video about our Nicaragua trip. We had a fellow that came with us they run a mining company up in Sudbury. And so he had this awesome equipment that he could use because they use it to film down in the mines. And his mom is a logistics coordinator. And so he did this video.
I want to take you away to a little place in Nicaragua where I had the opportunity to see something amazing.
the first time in their life they have received a gift from someone that not even know about them. So it is a blessing for our children to receive a shoebox.
I'm excited to be here today with these children. There's hundreds here and more still arriving. Each one of these children are going to receive a shoebox that you pack for them. That's very, very special.
Before getting there, an amazing amount of work was done for all this to be possible. People from all walks of life came together to do something absolutely remarkable for children around the globe. Millions of boxes poured into collection centers across the country to be sorted, packed, and shipped all over the planet.
We're about to meet our new group of OCC members. Hey guys, I'm James. Nice to meet you. High five somebody. There we go.
This is a life-altering trip, and I truly pray that everyone gets a chance to do this, because it's unbelievable.
It's the middle of July and it feels just like Christmas. These guys are crazy excited. This is awesome, right? She wants a photo.
It was a chaos, but it was good. It was good.
I'm now here in Santo Tomas, and we're actually attending a graduation ceremony for the greatest journey. There's got to be nearly 100 or 120 kids at this program.
And I work with Samaritans Purse, and I've been packing shoeboxes for a long time, but behind me we have a service on for children who have graduated from the greatest journey. And the greatest journey for me is really what shoeboxes are all about, because our shoeboxes are temporal, but they learn the gospel on the greatest journey. Last year almost 1 million children came to Christ just through learning the greatest journey, and so it's a privilege to be here with my Canadian teammates and seeing today alone in this service 150 children are graduating from the greatest journey. Many have received the Lord as their Savior, and they will go on to eternity with us in heaven. So I'm just thankful to be here and be a part of it.
It is incredible to see something like this with your own eyes. Just an explosion of happiness and gratefulness. But, you know, the world's a funny place. Even surrounded by all this excitement, some realities are impossible to ignore. This is Maria. She had only been blind for a short time. We were told later she merely had an infection in her eyes, but the doctors opted to remove her eyes completely. But, you know, I had packed a box, and I was eager to see his reaction. He took a look around and closed up the box. So I said to him, I'm like, oh, let's take a look through your box, buddy. We'll just take the lid and we'll put it to the side. We can move the stuff over and take a look. You know, put it back, it's no problem. No, he wasn't having that. It's good inside the box, he said. For safekeeping, I guess. All the kids around him were digging into their boxes and going through their stuff. And I'm sure all the people that packed those boxes would have done anything to be able to have the opportunity to see the look on their faces. And here I was, ready to look at the boy, my boy, look into the box that I had packed. But God had another plan. Because while I was selfishly trying to feed my moment, Maria was here trying to get into her box and missing hers. This is where God wanted me to be, and He made sure of it.
Están esas gafas de sol. Son muy padres. Son negros. Son muy grandes. Sí, sí. Oh, wow. ¿Sabes qué es? Es solo una parte de la... es una, ¿cómo se llama? Una flauta para hacer música. Sí.
Una flauta.
Flauta, sí. ¿Qué es esto? Yo no sé qué es.
We're watching them hand out the boxes, and we've heard stories about them where the box actually match exactly the needs of the kids. In the middle of this chaos, God can actually go and take the proper box and give it to the right kid. From our vantage point, it looks entirely random, but what's amazing is that in the middle of all that, there's order. God has been able to use us to do what He wants, regardless of our intentions, but regardless of our selfish motivations behind things. He's able to do what needs to be done.
This is our home, and these are our children. These are His children, and He's counting on us to take care of them. That's no small task, but it can begin. And it can begin with a simple gift.
I spoke with a teacher there who had a set of brothers in her class for years who had never had shoes. And there was tears streaming down her face when she told us that when the shoe boxes came to her school, she watched those two boys open their boxes and they both had shoes. We hear lots of stories of situations where there's something that a child's heart is looking for. Sometimes it's as simple as a geometry set or a stuffed dog or a pair of shoes. And we do find there's many times where what that child has longed for or needed ends up in their hands by way of a shoebox that's been packed by a Canadian. So as Canadians, it was a blessing to be there with 25 other Canadians and just to be able to share some of what you have done with the children in Nicaragua. And I just wanted to open it up if anybody had any questions. You did see some graduation services there. We did attend graduations for over 600 children. So after the children get their shoebox gifts, about 2 to 3 weeks later, the children are given an invitation to come to some Bible programs at the church. That's their choice. We do it separately from the shoebox so that every child gets a shoebox gift regardless of their race or their gender or their religion. But about 2-3 weeks later, they are invited with parent permission if they'd like to come back for the program. And so if they come to all the sessions at the Bible program, you would have seen some of their graduations. And I can tell you, for some of these kids, that's the only graduation they're ever going to have. They're not going to get a medal for winning soccer, and they're not going to get a certificate for a dance recital, and they're not going to graduate from grade 8 or high school. So these graduations are a really big deal. And so they get literature in their own language, they get a cap, and their families come. The children have prepared songs, they do mimes, they do skits. And just as much as we celebrated graduation there, for a lot of these kids, this is the first and only taste they'll have of being able to start something and finish something and get acknowledged for it. So it was just as remarkable to be at their graduations as it was to hand out 1,000 shoe boxes. But I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has any questions about Operation Christmas Child.
What happens to the cartons?
The cartons there, lots of different things, but a lot of the families will like to take them. So moms will come and take them and use them for mats in their home or even storage. Yep.
Are we supposed to keep all pig things out this year?
No. No. Yeah. Yeah. Our brochure this year, if you find, there's a few how to pack a shoebox brochures on the table outside the door, but that is last year. So you can use it as a resource, but I wouldn't circulate it. We're getting all new brochures put out this year. And all they will say in them is not to put anything that would damage a box, which would be anything liquid, not to put anything that would scare or harm a child, so no war-related toys, no plastic knives, those types of things, and then nothing food. So it leaves it a lot more open, yeah, for what you can put in a box. Yes? It did. We took that down, so when we pack here and we ship from here through their customs, we can't put candy in there. But when we traveled personally, and that was James's box, so his personal box could have the candy in it. Yeah, and I actually I took down a large box with just a bunch of small kind of peppermint candies, all individually wrapped, and gave them to the local pastor to be sharing with the kids in his community. So we could travel with them as individuals, because if you traveled to Nicaragua, you could take some candy for yourself. We just can't ship it in for distribution like that. Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, yes?
What type of shoe then? Would it be like flip-flop or?
Flip-flops, those Crocs are really great. You know, the Crocs are lightweight and they dry really easily, and yet they also have good traction. But you know what? People shop for OCC all year. And people that like to pack a number of boxes will be shopping throughout the year watching for bargains. And so you're right, you know, late summer, early fall, maybe there's a sale on flip-flops and Crocs, and that's what you pick up. One year I was at Factory Shoe in London, and they had a grocery cart full of running shoes, but the real simple kind. They were women's, and they were just black, and they had nothing on them. They were just totally plain, and they were lace up, and he wanted $2, but they were a running shoe. So we bought 50 pair. And sometimes I'll ask a manager, hey, this is what we're buying them for, can we get a discount? And I've had that. I was buying $20 rain boots at Loblaws that were down to $3.44, but they had about, 30 pair there, and I couldn't afford all of them. So I talked to the manager and told him what I was buying for, and he gave me a $50 gift card. So I cleaned out the boots. Yeah. Yeah. And then if you're watching, you know, if you do pack a shoebox, you know, late August, early September, all the school supplies are on a fraction of the price. So you're paying 97 cents for a pack of pencil crayons instead of $6. Or you're getting a coil ring notebook for 10 cents instead of $2. So those types of things just stretch your dollar. But yeah, as you come across sales, you know, and we know that God works through people. So if he's put something on your heart or in your hand to put in a shoebox, we would just encourage you to do that. Yes?
Where are you going this year?
I'm not going anywhere this year, yeah. There is, one of our managers is going to Senegal. He leaves next week. And so we usually have one of our managers traveling each year, going somewhere different. But I just came back last week from our Global International Conference. So we have one of those every 3 years. And we were in Florida for that. And we had 129 countries there. So there was representatives there from all the countries that we send boxes to. And some of them are restricted countries. We were allowed to go in and deliver shoe boxes, but they're restricted on other levels. So we weren't allowed to do photography or ask them too many questions, but they were all there to say thank you. There were so many national leaders there. If I could bring back their thanks and their gratitude for those of you that pack shoe boxes, they get to deliver them hand to hand. They see it all the time. And so they are so blessed to be able to distribute them. And what they want to make sure that we relay back to all of you that pack shoe boxes is thank you. Because your boxes are impacting children. I can tell you this, that in El Salvador, lately, we have had the police and government officials ask Samaritans Purse to bring in more shoe boxes and to do more of the Bible programming with the children, because they've proven now that in the areas where the shoe boxes have gone and the programming has taken place, crime rate has dropped from 80% to 50%. And that's the only thing they can attribute it to. So they have literally asked us, as government officials and police authorities, if we would continue to outreach in that country because it's making an impact in the community. Something we never thought of, something we didn't plan for, something we didn't expect, But it's a reality that they're seeing, and of course, anything, they just want their crime rate down. Their statistic is 80% of their adults are involved in criminal activity. So distributions there are often done under armed guard. When my daughter was 16, they had armed guard there to protect the kids, and then they take them safely back home. So we do work really closely with our national leaders because we don't want to put any of the children in jeopardy, and we won't go where we're not to go. We only go where we're asked to go. So if we're in a country, it's been at the request of someone in that country to ask us to come. And I can tell you, like, we have some of our national leaders get shot at, get imprisoned, get threatened. In West Africa and Liberia, they still wanted to distribute shoeboxes once we can assure that the disease in that area had been controlled and they weren't spreading disease. They still wanted to reach children there, they said, more than ever with a shoebox gift, because it was a very dark time. In the months to come, Samaritan's Purse is putting out a film called Facing Darkness, and it is the whole story of the Ebola breakout in West Africa and the role that Samaritan's Purse played in it, and then Kent Brantley and Nancy Wrightwell, just their situation in contracting the disease, and then what all the players are currently doing now just to try and keep those countries, there's a few of them, healthy. So keep an eye for it. It's called Facing Darkness. It's been out on limited release here and there, but we're hoping to get it out on a more wide release and into Netflix sometime this year. Yeah. Sorry? They're fine, yeah. They were given, exploratory medication, but if they weren't given it, they would have died, so they really had nothing to lose. So yeah, they're totally fine. Yeah, and Nancy's gone back to West Africa and is still there with her husband, and Kent Brantley's still here with his family, educating the health profession and the U.S. officials on what really needs to take place, because the response was very slow to that crisis. There really wasn't a response to it until 2 American doctors contracted Ebola. And then the nation started responding. But it wouldn't have been nearly as disastrous if nations had started responding earlier. And so one of Kent Brantley's roles right now is talking to government officials, and I even met with Obama at that point, just saying, how can we intercede earlier to prevent that kind of catastrophe? Oh, yes. Sorry, I can't see in the dark. Yes. Yeah.
Make sure that, like, what I'm saying is that it's evenly distributed, the boxes.
Well, yeah, we go to countries where we're asked. So there's obviously countries that we're not in because we haven't been asked to go or they don't want us there. So in countries that do want their children to receive shoebox, they have to meet the criteria of children living subject to war, famine, or natural disaster. Then what they do is approach Samaritan's Purse and say, we would like shoebox gifts for our children. We don't just willy-nilly ship them out. There's a whole strategic plan that they have to submit so that there's accountability. So, because these are a resource in their hands. These boxes can be used as leverage for power or money. And so we have international directors from Boone, where our national headquarters is, and in our affiliate countries that work very closely and travel frequently throughout the year working with our national leadership teams in countries where we've been asked to go. So Canada has 13 countries where we send. There are 13 countries that ship out. All of those 13 countries have memorandums of understandings and relationships with certain countries around the world. So we have our 13. Last year, Gambia came on for the first time. Ukraine came on a couple years ago when the war started. They approached Canada and asked if we would send boxes because they knew that we knew how to send boxes to countries that are cold. So our knitters got busy doing scarves and knits and mitts and hats. And so when they approach us, we have a whole strategic plan that we put into place so that their leadership team is accountable. It's never one individual. It's made up of a number of different people on their leadership team. And they have to present to us how many children in their area they want to reach, how they're going to reach them, and how long that can take. And you're right, it could take, one distribution might cover it off. It could take, 6 distributions for 6 years to reach the number of children in those areas that fulfill the criteria that we're reaching out to. And then the States and the UK and Australia, New Zealand, they all have relationships with other countries. Does that answer your question?
Yes. So
yeah.
It's a coordinating between all the countries that are
yes.
involved to make sure that sort of one country doesn't get.
Absolutely. Well, they might get more based on population or based on need. And there literally are billions of children that meet this criteria around the world that could still receive a shoebox. It's still a significant number of children that have not yet been reached, despite the fact that 11 million shoeboxes went out last year. There are, I think they said 4.8 billion still that are not accessible, either because we don't have enough shoeboxes or the country's not cooperative. Different things like that, yeah.
So you're, the national leaders that you speak of are
Yes.
your Samaritan Purse?
No, they are leadership volunteers in the receiving countries. They don't work for Samaritan's Purse. So they're usually made up of government officials, not-for-profits, church representation ministers, teachers. So they're a collaborative of, usually between 5 to 7 individuals that form a national leadership team. And then our assistant international directors work directly with them, depending on what country is sending and what country is receiving.
So the safety issue for all concerned, but the delivery of the shoebox is taken care of.
Oh, absolutely. Which is why we work with national leadership teams. Like, I'm not going to go in as a Canadian and tell Nicaragua how to do this. The U.S. isn't going to go into the Sudan and tell them how they should roll this out. We really need to listen to the leaders in that country and understand best practices and best processes. But we have to have accountability as well, because we recognize they're stewarding resources and gifts that have come from sending countries. So we want them into honest and accountable hands, and those people that have a real heart and a plan to be able to reach the kids in their community. And that might involve walking or boats or camels. It doesn't really matter, but through the relationship with their leadership team there and here, and there's multiple visits throughout the year to make sure we have transparency and accountability so that boxes are going where we've been understanding they're supposed to go.
So the risk from the influence.
Yeah, and we also have our people present. So we're making sure that and not all countries are like that, right? Lots of them, not a problem at all. But we certainly recognize, like years ago, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, in some countries where you go, if you bring 500 children together and all the adults, you can create some chaos. And depending on that country, that can go in not a good direction. So they've learned, which is why a lot of times they'll use schools and they'll use teachers, because they also know they can keep order, they know the kids, and they've got a very orderly process for bringing children in, moving children out. That's the minority of the time. Most of the time, that was only that one situation. So we were at about 8 different distributions that week. There was only one area where they said, it's not a safe area. Now, we didn't see anything. There's nobody there with guns. There's nobody there with weapons. They just know that this is the school in the area, and it's not the best location to be opening boxes here. And so the kids were brought in, had their program. We had our fun. They had a meal, and then they went back home out of that initial area. Yes. You mean if somebody goes on a distribution trip? Generally, most of the trips are like 7 to 10 days. And so you would be at, maybe 2 to 3 events per day, depending on the area that you're in. So most of those trips are between 7 and 10 days, yeah. 99.9% of the trips don't have us on it. So although we can apply, and anyone can apply online to go on a distribution trip, most of the trips don't have outsiders, if you will, attend them. Most of them are led directly by their leadership teams there on the ground with their own children and their own leaders and their own parents. Yeah, that's a great question. So right on the table out there, I don't know if you have a phone or a pencil or a paper, but I put a piece of paper there that shows you the name, phone number, and email of the contact person that would be in your area. So we have, Joyce Scammell, who's in the Port Elgin area. We have Ann Hahn in the Hanover area. We have Wilma Frost in the Owen Sound area. So they're all local volunteers. So you can take a picture of that page on the table. I ask that you not take it because it's the only one there. Or, write down their name and their number, and they'll have the resources for you, and they're right here local to support you. Yeah. And most of those supplies, they start coming out in the fall. But as I said, people are collecting and packing throughout the year. But in terms of when you'll start to see the program really be visible, it's usually in around October. So individuals pack their shoe boxes at home. or children pack them as a school classroom, or churches pack them together as a congregation, or a church may have a whole group get together and pack them, or all the church members just might take one home and pack it and bring it back to their church. Same with schools, same with camps. The boxes that show up to the processing center for inspection in November have all been pre-packed. So it's folks like yourselves in your community in the fall or whatever time of year, and you can use your own shoebox. I used to go to Walmart and ask them for empty shoeboxes, and they would give me tons. We also supply shoeboxes that you can get through those volunteer contacts that are listed on the page on the table, and you can pack with one of our classic, red and green shoeboxes, but you don't have to use one of those. So you can pack it any time of the year that you want. Most people generally pack in the fall, but then in November, they take those back to what we call a collection center. So Shoreline Baptist down the road is a collection center. So if you've packed a shoebox in November, you can take your shoebox there. We have St. Mark's in Hanover. We have Shallow Lake Community Church in Shallow Lake. We have Owen Sound Alliance. Those churches are all what we call collection centers. So anybody that's packed a box, come that third week in November, you take your box to one of those churches, and they'll see that it gets to the processing center for inspection, and then from there they go out around the world. We also have what we call drop-off locations. So churches are collection centers to collect filled shoeboxes, but so are some local businesses. We have local businesses that are they're great for a drop-off location. And if you own a business or know someone that does, and you think that they would be willing to help us collect shoeboxes back up that third week in November, it's just 1 week out of the year, and they would agree to saying, oh yeah, I'll open my doors for my community. I'll be a holding place, so my community members can drop off their filled shoeboxes here, and then they would commit to, at the end of that collection week in the third week in November, they would commit to taking all those shoeboxes to one of the church collection centers. And then from then on to inspection in Kitchener. Yeah.
So what you put in your box yourself stays in your box?
Yes, unless it's on the inappropriate list in the brochure. Because we still will get people that will put in shampoo. Well, we have to take shampoo out. It can't go. But I'll tell you that there's over 65 local charities that glean all the items that can't go in shoeboxes that get taken out at our warehouse in Kitchener. So it's 65, like Memorial Boys and Girls Club, Men's Mission, Crisis Pregnancy Center. We also don't take used items. So if people put in used clothing, we have to pull that out. If they've put in shampoo, we have to pull that out. If they've put in food, we have to pull that out. So everything that's pulled out has already been told in the brochure to not put in, but not everybody, maybe reads that. So all those items are redonated to local charities, so nothing is going to waste. So all good questions. I thank you for listening and just for coming to hear about the impact of the project, and thank you for participating and just blessing these children and their families. It's such a simple little thing that we do, and the impact is it's just such a great reward. So I just say thank you on behalf of Operation Christmas Child and the leaders around our country that I've heard from that just really want to extend their gratitude to you for what you do. Thank you.
So thank you everyone for coming again to our adventure talk, and thank you very much, Chris, for your excellent presentation, and hopefully I'll see you out for our last talk on May the 3rd with Sandy Lindsay, and she'll be sharing a slideshow and some stories about her mission trip to Cali, Colombia. So thank you very much.
The preceding program was brought to you by Bruce Telecom and Whiteman TV,